2 minutes late, 4 minutes late. I apologize. Depends on who you are. You might think like, where the hell is he? But it's all right. Sorry. I post it in like one timestamp in one place and another timestamp in another, and then I was late for both. So I apologize and thank you to anybody who's here. Stamp in one. Hang on. Okay, so we're good on that one. All right, cool. All right, and then I got to do one more thing to verify what I'm doing here. All right. Welcome everybody, though, for future, hello. I'm going to do something really quick to make this stream work a little bit better. Oh no. Am I back on yet? Let's see here. Oh, there I am. Cool. Okay. I can pause this one over here now. All right. Whoever's here, wow, you're very patient. Thank you. Okay. So before I forget, guys, don't let me forget later on that I need to come back to this issue. What's going on there, Mr. Trump? I don't know, man. For those unfamiliar, I went to school at Wellington Elementary School, so it's like not in Ohio though. So it's just these weird synchronicities between me and the Don that seem to be weird. But anyways, all right. All right, let's see here. I think things are going all right now. So let's get into the topic on, all right, intuitive communication. So I think I wanted to talk about this a little bit before I get into too many of the other topics, even though I got one that's kind of heavy this evening. And but I thought it was worth discussion, not because I'm trying to immediately draw a correlation from one data set to another, but simply because I question, like, why isn't it mentioned at a deeper level relative to some of these bird illnesses in multiple states across the United States? And I didn't really see a lot of other reports, although I quite honestly didn't dig deeper significantly to find out like where it's being reported and where it isn't. But it seemed a little strange to me that there is this thing going on relative to, I guess you could say the bird illnesses. All right, cool. Just making sure we're streaming here still. So I didn't give much notice on this one tonight, folks. So anybody who's here, welcome, and I appreciate you joining. All right. So relative to bird illnesses in the eastern U.S., I saw this article on Zero Hedge, and so I want to get into deeper detail on that. Those unfamiliar with it, I'll send it to you here. And it's called "Why Are Large Numbers of Birds Suddenly Dropping Dead in Multiple States?" And so perhaps we can get into that one first. I don't know. I can put that one up on the screen. Actually, I think I'm going to do that. Because the other topic, I think I'm going to wait until that's some of the audience that I typically have in here, and I have more of them around if they're interested in talking about those things. Because I think this one topic I think is for a broader audience here. This birds thing and the intuitive communication thing is probably more for a different audience. And then when I discuss things relative to Trump and things like that, I'm going to be talking more about symbolic communication instead of more like less to do with global politics and more to do with like, what is this thing that Trump does? What is his like, you know, his language and the way he kind of seems to be doing like double speak sometimes or sending out these little cryptic messages like, what's up with that? You know, is it good, bad, indifferent, whatever? I mean, I'm just here to talk about it at a broader level. You know, I have my own feelings, I guess, about why it happens or what the larger reasons could be. Anyway, so let's get into that. So I'm going to share with you really quick. Let's see here. Why are large numbers of birds? That way, I want this to be good for the future, guys, because I know I didn't give much notice on this tonight, and I don't want to spend like, you know, tons and tons of time doing this. I want it to be kind of like quick. Why are large numbers of birds suddenly dropping dead in multiple states? By Tyler Durden of Zero Hedge. Those unfamiliar, I put that link in there. As if we didn't have enough weird things going on now, birds are suddenly dropping dead in large numbers all across the eastern half of the country. Before they die, a lot of these birds are exhibiting very strange symptoms. Experts are telling us that in many cases, birds are developing crusty or puffy eyes, and often they appear to go completely blind. In addition, quite a few of these dying birds lose their ability to stay balanced, and we are being told that some even seem to be having seizures. If scientists understood what was causing this to happen, that would be one thing. But at this point, they have no idea why this is taking place, and that is quite alarming. So far, confirmed incidences of this strange phenomenon have been documented in Washington, D.C., Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. Could it be possible that we are dealing with a mystery illness that started in one state and that is now spread to other surrounding states, or is something else going on here? We are being told that blue jays, common grackles, and European starlings are the most common birds that are being affected. But whatever is happening is not just limited to one species of birds, and I think that that should be a red flag. If our best experts even had a decent working theory about why so many birds are dying, I probably would not have written this article. But at this point, they are openly admitting that they have absolutely no idea why so many birds are suddenly dropping dead. We are experiencing an unusual amount of bird mortality this year, said Kate Slankard, an avian biologist with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. We have yet to figure out what the problem is. The condition seems to be pretty deadly. In Kentucky, the bird deaths seem to have begun in late May. The following comes directly from the official website of the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. In late May, the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources began receiving reports of sick and dying birds with eye swelling and crusty discharge, as well as neurological signs. Hang on here, I just lost my place. Okay, wildlife agencies in Indiana, Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and West Virginia have reported similar problems. That over. State wildlife agencies are working with diagnostic laboratories to investigate the cause of mortality. Kentucky Fish and Wildlife has sent more than 20 samples for lab testing to the Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study at the University of Georgia. More results are pending, but no definitive cause of death has been identified at this time. After testing 20 samples, they still have no idea what is going on. According to Slankard, hundreds of birds in her state have now become victims. They'll just sit, often kind of shaking. Slankard said it's pretty safe to say that hundreds of birds in this state have had this problem. But of course, the truth is that we have no way of knowing how many birds have actually been affected. It could be thousands of birds in the state. It could be hundreds of thousands. We just don't know. And Kentucky is just one of the states that has been hit. In Indiana, authorities tested for avian flu and West Nile virus, but those tests came back negative. Indiana wildlife officials said that they have been suspicious deaths of blue jays, robins, northern cardinals, and brown-headed cowbirds in 5 counties. James Brindle, spokesman for the state's Department of Natural Resources, said birds there have tested negative for avian influenza and West Nile virus. One theory that is floating around is that these birds are ingesting large amounts of pesticides because of all the cicadas that they are eating. All right, let's stop right there. I think that right so far, before we get deep into conspiracy theory land, that this is probably amongst the most plausible things that you could probably associate this with. The thing that I wanted to highlight, though, and I did some information about this on Twitter recently, though, is that I do think that there could be some things to do with broader deployments of more electromagnetic spectrum that could potentially be within frequencies that are just affecting birds of certain varieties more. And I would think that you'd just want to look at how the characteristics of those different types of birds to see what they have in common, and find out how those types of factors within their navigation, how they get around, or maybe their particular frailties within their genetics. Do they have a thicker layer on the outside, or rather a thinner layer relative to the skeletal structure and external layer, whatever they would have as a quote epidural layer, their feathers, and things of that nature. But the feathers and the skin beneath the feathers of these birds, like, are some of them just a little bit thinner within that realm? And would they be more susceptible to things that are of a microwave, electromagnetic, or whatever type of environment, that those spectrums increasing in nature could just be that it's attacking areas where they perch, and that they're now being cooked, and that when they, after being cooked by these antennas, they're just, which does happen, guys. I mean, if you've ever, this would be consistent with what would happen to a human, is all I'm saying, if it was electromagnetic in nature. If you point an antenna at a person, it's going to happen to them what's happening to these birds. You get puffy eyes. It F's with your, it's like it's neurotoxic. It'll make you twitch. It'll make you nauseous. It'll make you feel sick. You'll vomit a lot of times. I've had it happen to me at my job. Those unfamiliar, I'm a former telecommunications engineer, 20 years experience there. And so, that's kind of what I bring to the table as far as my insights into that. I can actually speak from experience, like what those things feel like. So I don't think you can entirely eliminate electromagnetic spectrum, is all I'm trying to say. So when I say this, I'm not going to go around, quote, saying that it's 5G in the classic sense, just that it's worth examination. If this is a cluster of states, then let's look beyond the typical theories of, okay, once we've eliminated these avionic flus and everything like that, number one, I think that yes, probably the most plausible out of these is the exposure from cicadas through something, because those cicadas are the anomaly here. There are something that's kind of been introduced that doesn't happen every year, that I would say if this doesn't happen next year, or you don't see it at the same rate, and cicadas go away, then yeah, you may be able to go like, whatever, the problem's gone away, and we can't, run around saying like it had to have been these antennas. So again, guys, I'm not that person that just says it has to be one thing or the other. I just simply ask that we at least examine what are the factors that could have happened. And as a radio frequency engineer, I would just say that this is consistent with a rollout of a series of frequencies. So it's made me curious, and it's something that I might want to look deeper into to say like, okay, where have new frequencies been deployed, like maybe in the 600 megahertz range, or in those new EHF bands that are, I think, 20, what is it here? Hang on. Here's my 5G slide. Here it is. Okay. It would be, let's see here, 28 and 39 gigahertz. And so what I'm looking at here was that going back a couple years, like the areas that were going to be receiving like 600 megahertz do include Washington, do include some of these eastern states like Washington, D.C. area. And I would expect that, because 5G in the extremely high frequency band, no, wait, that's the 2.5 gigahertz band they're going to be deploying that. Let's see here, because that's different. I don't know, guys. I would expect that you would be having these 28 and 39 gigahertz rollouts in quite a number of states right now, because the last time I updated this slide was a couple years ago, and that's like freaking, decades in the wireless area. So I'm going to have to like look into like where are the known deployments of 5G. I can actually do that on some of the trade publications, but I would say like it might be worth looking into who's rolled out these 28 gigahertz and 39 gigahertz frequencies, and did a whole cluster of those frequencies get rolled out, or in addition to the 600 megahertz and the 2.5 gigahertz. Now, they're all worth discussing, not simply these new ones that are EHF, that are extremely high frequency. And the reason why, folks, is because I can actually speak to this. I mean, I have done entire articles on it that I can give you here. Actually, let's see here. Let me get one for you. It's called Extremely High Frequency. I got to go to my channel. And I'm going to get you a link. I'm not going to play the article tonight because it's like half an hour. But if you want to know about like things that they knew about how the impact of birds is, yeah, there are slides that are in this article. Wait, hang on. Actually, you know something? We can play this one. I think this is worth playing, actually. It's not a half hour. Let's just do this while I'm in here. Yeah, I think this one's a good one to do. I've done some articles on 5G lately, so I want to talk a little bit more about EHF, extremely high frequency, as it relates to millimeter wave, and then SHF, because in the United States, SHF is being rolled out currently. Hang on really quick, folks, here. Hang on. I know you're hearing it. So some of that falls in the SHF and some falls in the EHF, and depending on the engineer you talk to, they may qualify both as EHF. So it's just me babbling, blah 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 blah. There we go. Safety studies and things like that. Like for me, I got a little bit confused about these ideas. Like I was trying to this is important to the topic, though. My experience with SHF, microwave point-to-point communications. You know, these were just like like dishes that would see point-to-point and create a link between two towers, for example, and then I would maintain some of that equipment within the towers and things like that. So that's what I knew about it. Aside from that application, I didn't know a whole lot about anything in that gigahertz range, and never dealt with anything that's being deployed now as far as that goes, as far as those numbers. So I just don't have a lot of knowledge about how it propagates and things like that, like how far the signal sees and things like that, compared to some of these other things that are UHF range, because I did have a lot of work experience with those. But anyways, the reason why I want to talk about this is because I did a presentation a really long time ago, a couple years ago, I should say, called Controlled Offensive Behavior. It was basically a study of a report that our government did. I believe it was the Defense Intelligence Agency did in 1972. It discusses frequency by frequency band, almost, about safety studies, what the physiological behavioral effects are of different frequencies. I put that out a couple of years ago, and I really couldn't get a lot of people to watch it, even though I thought it was pretty important. So maybe now folks will kind of go back. I'll put a link to it. I would encourage you, if you're curious about this particular topic involving 5G, to look at part 5 of the Controlled Offensive Behavior report, and I'll put a link to that. But if you're curious about physiological behavioral effects of frequencies in general, based on what the U.S. government had already studied and conceded to knowing back in the 70s, I would encourage you to go through that presentation. It's a couple hours if you spend time on all of it. So but it's split up into different sections. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, part 4, 1 and 2, and then 5. And I would encourage you to go back and look at that, because I'm going to quote from this next piece here. And so I'm going to cut to that document here, and I'm going to show you some slides. And before I do, I just kind of want to remind people I'll show you some charts involving electromagnetic spectrum, just to say that, if you're going to ask people questions, regardless of how much experience they have, try to be patient with them, because really it takes a lot. It's really confusing trying to manage all these numbers inside your mind and everything like that, especially when there's a lot of things going on. So just try to be patient with the folks out there that are trying to help out with these topics, because I got to tell you, it's not easy to keep track of all the numbers. Okay, so getting back to this one, at part 5 of this Controlled Offensive Behavior report, this is really where we get into super high frequency, and then kind of getting closer to extremely high frequency, and actual studies that have been done as far as behavioral effects and physiological effects. So quoting from that here, I'm just going to go back and do this again. I would encourage you still, though, to go back and review the entire report. But on 109 here of the report, it says, a Soviet review article concerning the effects of super high frequency wavelength of from 1 millimeter to 1 meter on the central nervous system is worth incorporation into this report. Although the work is primarily physiological, it is meaningful because it contains some of the important areas of interest to the Soviets and could be correlated to Soviet work with other frequencies. Kolodov reports that the effect of SHF, super high frequency, on the functions of the central nervous system is of particular interest. So far, few studies have dealt with this subject. Kolodov contends that foreign investigators, chiefly American, use an SHF field, super high frequency, with an intensity on the order of tens of watts per square centimeter, which results in a considerable heating of the brain above 40 degrees Celsius. Depending upon the duration of the radiation, mice and rabbits have stopped eating for some time or have made spasmodic movements and even died. Post-mortem examination of the animals have shown that the action of the powerful SHF field has resulted in destruction of the brain cells. Especially extensive destruction has been observed in the interbrain and midbrain. When the head of a monkey is exposed to a strong SHF super high frequency field, the animal behaves normally for the first minute or two and then covers his eyes and starts to go to sleep. But a minute later, he wakes up, the rate of respiration increases, the pupils dilate despite the bright illumination, and there is a heavy secretion of saliva. After some time, the monkey begins to shake with convulsions and utter cries. If the radiation is discontinued, by the following day the monkey in no way differs from other monkeys who have not been exposed to radiation. If exposure is continued, the animal dies after a few minutes. Experiments have shown that when men or animals are exposed to radiation, there is a change in the sensitivity to sound, light, and olfactory stimuli. A study of the receptors in the skin, the gastrointestinal system, and the circulatory system has shown slight changes in them after exposure to the action of super high-frequency SHF. Consequently, the SHF super high-frequency field can act on the first link in the reflex arc. At the same time, SHF may act differently on the central nervous system. On the other hand, the appearance of slow waves in the record of the biological currents of the cerebral cortex, the inhibition of reflex activity, and the appearance of various vegetative reactions indicate action of the SHF field on the interbrain, where the higher vegetative centers are located. The data from physiological experiments check very well with the results from morphological investigations. After exposure to super high frequency, reversible structural changes were observed in the cerebral cortex and in the interbrain. It may be assumed that those areas of the brain are the most sensitive to the action of an SHF field, although if the intensity or duration of the action is increased, other parts of the central nervous system will also participate in the reaction. Kolodov concludes by stating that only further experiments will help us explain the mechanisms of the direct action of a super high frequency field of non-thermal intensity, but it can already be stated that these effects can be produced by an electromagnetic field other than one of super high frequency. So again, stating that it's not exclusive to this frequency band, but that's basically a proof of what the physiological and behavioral effects are. And I go into far more detail if you want to go into that report.
All right. So that's most of it. You don't need to see the whole blah, blah, blah before and after of it. But I wanted you to get the kind of like the core of the material so that you kind of have some things that you can reference back to on my channel. You can see the name of that article. I would encourage you to go through my 5G playlist in particular so that you can kind of have some basics on how it works. Frankly, guys, it's a little bit dated, so I probably should make a new 5G presentation in the near future. It really wasn't something that I was trying to focus on. It's just simply that because I spent years in the wireless telecommunications industry, a lot of people ask questions. And, you know, a lot of times the answers to those questions, there's things that I can learn from people that, you know, whatever. But sometimes you tell people things like, you know, well, we can look into the smart meter, we can look into like satellite dishes and things of that nature. But a lot of times the most exposure that you get to frequency wise is from just constantly holding a device. You know, it really is. And then I think, especially with these chi energy systems that are doing wireless charging, I'm not sure people understand like how that interaction, even though it's meant to only work when it's on the charger or whatever. I don't know. It seems to me like there can be hacks to make that thing kind of go off and on and pulse frequencies in that range that are still within that wireless power transfer range, you know, things of that nature. So I would just say, like, look deeper on these issues. I've done my own tests, and I can say that when I compare like a smartphone to like an air conditioner to a wall socket that has electricity in it to a television, we're talking E fields here, folks. Yeah, like it's through the roof on a smartphone compared to the others, you know, when it's right next to you. Yeah. the being inches away from a smartphone, that's like in the triple digits on your volts per meter of electrical field exposure, and the 50 hertz to 50 hertz to 400 kilohertz range is what I sweep for there when I get that measurement. So just sharing that with you. And that, you get more from that than you do other things. That's all. So I try to say, and one way you might want to start looking into this is to do body voltage readings, which I'm trying to do more of myself now that I have access to the grounding gear and posts. Special thank you to the person who provided that for me. I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to another topic, guys. I can get deeper into this whole thing at another time. But I wanted to get more about intuitive communication, symbolic communication, things involving clairvoyance and telepathy, and what really does exist versus what doesn't, or whatever, guys. Well, I'm a believer only because I've experienced this phenomenon for a number of years outside of the crap that you see on whatever the media. I've learned that the vast majority of the things that I've learned in the media don't even touch upon the actual way these things work. It's very seldom anybody discusses it with any amount of truth, and that's why I've always I don't really know if Dan Sherman's legit or not. He just feels true to me. His findings in his book and the way he discusses the concepts of bending waves. You'll have to look inside the description section of this clip to find that interview. It's about, it's about an hour, I would say, altogether if you watch all three parts. And it's a really well done. Richard D. Hall interviews this guy, Dan Sherman, who was in the U.S. Air Force, and he was part of some NSA and some black budget type or gray budget type projects, some that he can discuss and others that he can't. And it all involved things that involve some form of telepathic communication with what he perceived that even though he was never told this directly, he always felt like he was interacting with some form of entity that was external from human, and that it was able to just send information to him. It was able to basically just communicate, send waveforms that he was able to bend, and it was able to bend back and forth. And that you just have to look deeper into it. They give you some visual representations of it in Richard Hall's interview, which I think is a very well done. That's why I put it in the description section. So those of you looking at this in the future, and just if you want something to do later tonight, I would really encourage you to check that out. And why do I say that? It's because, well, folks, tonight I just laughed because this whole Wellington Elementary thing, I went to Wellington Elementary School between 1982 to 1983. It's when I was in a tag classroom, and that was a group of kids that were, it was a talented and gifted program. We were just a bunch of little, I don't know. You had to have a triple digit IQ pretty much to get accepted into the program, and it had to be pretty well into that, I would say, to make it into the program. And it had a series of 3 grades in this school. There was the primary and the intermediates. And so my brother was actually in the intermediate program the same time that I was in the primary program. And we even had our classrooms linked. Talk about, man, you can't get away from your older brother, man. You go to school and he's still there, damn it. can go, just all he has to do is pass through that open door and just go hey, I can see you, pick on you a little bit if he wants to or whatever. Although to his credit, that didn't happen very often. He had better things to do back then at that time. But yeah, we were actually in these adjoined classrooms. So the two of us were actually, even when we went to school, there was 1 year, even though he's way older than me, because he's 3 years older than me, I should say, that we were actually, our classrooms bridged together. But the thing I'm just telling you guys is just as funny to me because I just learned it. These are just some uber genius. There's a bunch of them that I think have special abilities and things like that. And I think a lot's going to be learned about Stargate, the Operation Stargate, Project Stargate, some of the abilities that people have relative to some of these things, and some of the scholastic programs that were kind of keeping an eye on them, because I think that it was almost like it was presented as something that was supposed to have good intentions. And I think that they actually might have used it to just sort of selectively elevate some groups. And then just sort of, I think there are some parts of the people in that program that really seem to experience a lot of bad luck. And I'm starting to wonder if it's just simply because they understood that these tag kids were going to be a brain trust someday, of intellectual brain trust, and just be able to think outside the box and understand, problem solving at a different level. And so, yeah, it's a little bit like friends close, enemies closer, with the way that it sort of cultivated the children, gave them this top-notch education, open environment, and things like that. Yet at the same time, some of them that really excelled and others seem to have like whatever. So I'm kind of wondering like what the larger story behind that might be. You know, I did a little bit of research on it, but I think it's worth exploring a little bit, because I just remember that really well, even though that was very young when I was in that classroom, man. I was like 7, 8, 9, might have like turned 10. I think I started the program when I was 7 and I finished it when I was 10. And so I had a few different teachers, right, that were in the tag program or whatever. But that's why Trump, his whole way of doing symbolic communication, his return tonight and everything like that, it just made me laugh, because he's done things like this before where I was like going, there just seems to be this really weird intersection. Like he says, tell us like, hey, Joe Biden, send Trump, tell Putin to my warmest regards. And then tonight after, that just made me laugh, because if you saw one of my previous presentations, I can't explain it right now, guys, it'd take too long. There's almost like this correlation to the whole Wellington, Ohio being his selection, even though I went to Wellington Elementary in a Seattle suburb. It's nowhere near Ohio. But Ohio is very relevant, because if you know what's deeper going on, all the things that go on with labs and national laboratories and how that's all connected to, way deeper things. Yeah, there's a lot going on in Ohio. But yeah, a stronghold for politics as well and everything like that. But so yeah, guys. So when the intuitive communication pathways come in and everything like that, I try not to assign too many meanings to these things or whatever. It just kind of makes me chuckle. It could be a regular synchronicity, but there's been times straight up where it just overlapped with something that was going on where I had to say like, maybe it's not a synchronicity. But in this case, I think that what it really represents is that I think there actually is some pretty good news on the way. And I think things are going to work out. And I think there's a lot of reason to be positive in the country right now, despite how really effed a lot of things look. And that people should kind of like not let a lot of these things that are being presented to us as like that we have to accept. I don't think that you have to. And people are pushing back right now. And I think it's a really good thing. And the way that crowd was worked up and everything like that, I just think it's cool. It just shows that quite a few people did, in fact, like the guy and want him as the president, and I personally, regardless of how I felt about Trump, I really still feel like that they didn't really give the election to the right person. I think that there was in fact indeed evil shenanigans within the election. Evil shenanigans. I love that he used shenanigans tonight, because it's something that I use often in my material. I've even done a whole slides to talk about what are shenanigans, because I want people in other regions and other countries who don't know what shenanigans are to know what shenanigans are, and to know that it's a thing in Super Troopers as well. Yeah, evil shenanigans aren't shenanigans at all. They're just evil and tragic deeds. They're not shenanigans. Shenanigans are fun. So in aid of that, folks, let's try to make life a little bit more fun for one another, and let's have fun with the symbolic decryption and not always assign negativity to it. To me, this was a good sign. I went to school there. I've been doing some pretty weird, obscure symbolic decryption that I hope that some people would appreciate at some point, and I think that they do actually. And I think that a lot of those of us who think a little outside the box and have some strange ways of thinking or whatever, we'll find a place where our abilities will be appreciated. So anyways, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining tonight. I'll be back soon for another one. Thank you.